Hey everybody, it's Martian Monkey here, and this is going to be my The Flash Season 6 Episode 2 review. There's a lot going on with this episode. I'm not reviewing the whole season of The Flash, but I did want to touch on this episode because it's leading into huge Crisis on Infinite Earth stuff. I will be covering the whole crossover this year because it's such a big deal. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the biggest DC stories of all time, so I'll break that down later on in this video. We'll go step by step and talk about it, but I am going to review the full episode just for old time's sake, just to review it, because I used to review every episode. But I am going to be doing a lot more DC TV stuff. Arrow is ending this season. It's going to be their last season, so I'll do that finale review once that episode comes out, like next year, next TV semester, if you want to call it like that. But once that comes out, I'll review that too. And like I said, I'll do Crisis videos. I'm thinking of doing a Batwoman episode 1 review. So there's a lot going on with DC TV that I will be reviewing. But anyway, let's get into Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, before we get into the actual Crisis stuff, I am going to break down some of the things that's happening with the show that's outside of the Crisis things, because some people are kind of getting confused as to what's going with what, which storylines are going where, how long they're going to be on the show until they get cut and new storylines come in. So I'll just kind of break some of that down, starting with Bloodwork. Everybody wants to know who this character is. So the character that comes in to the show this season, right, the beginning of the season, and Caitlin attends his funeral, that's actually Bloodwork from the comics. In the comics, Bloodwork has the power to manipulate blood of his victims and turn them into his servants. So he's kind of having his own personal slaves after he manipulates the blood. Now, right now, we don't really know how his powers work, neither does he. So he kills that one guy in this episode, and then the guy comes back to life at the end. That's just because his powers are actually taking effect, and it's bringing that guy that he killed back to life. So he might not control him right now, but he will later on. I'm guessing that Bloodwork will only be the villain for the first half of the season, because they are teasing some stuff with the Black Hole organization from the comics. We'll touch on that in a minute, but it is cool seeing Bloodwork here. I think it's an interesting villain choice, and I do like how they're splitting up two different villains while Crisis is going on. Crisis is a huge event, so they're having to break down so much of that, but with Bloodwork here, it kind of makes for a distraction so that it's not too much of just Crisis stuff, so that you actually get a multiple variety of characters and things that are going on. So that's nice. They're kind of making it easy to follow this villain while also putting in all those Easter eggs and teasers for Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is important because Crisis, again, is such a huge event that they do need to lay those seeds pretty quickly. And they have been laying them since the beginning of The Flash, since the TV show started with that newspaper, but now it's kind of getting into full throttle Avengers Endgame mode. So it's really excited to see all of this come to fruition here in the season, but Bloodwork, again, is just kind of like a distraction for that, which is cool. But yeah, Bloodwork, super cool villain. I'm excited to see where they take him, but he's just kind of in the background learning how his powers work himself and researching. I'm wondering when the whole plot point of him needing Star Labs' help for his cure is actually going to come into play, and when he'll interact with Team Flash. That'll probably be a little bit like closer before Crisis, and then it'll just kind of pause for a little bit and then resume right after Crisis ends. So like, expect to see him maybe even after the mid-season finale, and then they finish him up in the next half of the season. But anyway, that's Bloodwork. So now let's talk about Ultraviolet and her cousin. So her cousin, okay, Ultraviolet, this is kind of hard to explain, but let's get down to it. Ultraviolet is the assassin that we saw at the end of the episode. Her cousin, Allegra, was the main focus of this episode. It deals with the whole subplot of Cecile's powers, her wanting to be a defense attorney for metahumans, which is super important. But the powers that her cousin Ultraviolet has, the assassin has, in this episode is the powers that Allegra has in the comics. She's actually a comic book character, which is super exciting. But she doesn't have the same powers as her cousin does. Maybe she will later on, maybe she won't. She is sticking around because she now works for Iris, so expect to see her more later on this season. Maybe not too much, but here and there before Crisis comes up. But she might even stay after that, who knows. So maybe she will get the same powers. Maybe there's some reason why they're keeping her around. Maybe there isn't. Or maybe she'll help Cecile and cover that story of her becoming a defense attorney for metahumans. But we'll see later on once that comes into play. So that's super exciting as well. I do like how they introduced her here because, again, another subplot to distract from Crisis, but it's also introducing the Black Hole organization. Ultraviolet, her cousin, was inducted into the society where the society or organization, Black Hole Organization, is exploiting metahumans to use them as their sort of, again, personal servants. So just like you have Bloodwork doing that to his victims, you have the Black Hole Organization doing that to metahumans that they can take advantage of. So that's where Ultraviolet comes in. Now, in the comics, the Black Hole Organization is ran by a guy named Ray Jin, who is a speedster. Who's pretty cool, if I may say so myself. Like, he's visually interesting, and so I think that they're going to have a lot of fun with that character. I'm kind of sad that they dropped the whole Godspeed storyline because it's such a big character from the comics, and they didn't really do him justice. So it's kind of annoying that they just kind of like sped over that, and they didn't even really talk about that in episode 1 of how there's duplicates of Godspeed, but then they just kind of switch gears to Ray Jin. Kind of weird, but I do like that they're bringing in some more speedster-oriented characters, because that's what made The Flash such a big deal back when season 1 and 2 were going on. So that's exciting. I'm glad that they're doing that. But the Black Hole Organization will be showing up a lot more, probably towards the second half of the season after they wrap up with Bloodwork. So again, be on the lookout for that. So now that we have those two things out of the way, let's talk about Crisis. Like I said, Crisis is a big deal in the comics. It was a big event to sort of kind of reboot some things that were in the DC universe, but also it was kind of like just again a big crossover event where a lot of stuff was happening cosmic wise. It was a huge multiverse event because the multiverse is such a big deal in both Marvel and DC comics, but I feel like because DC kind of made this storyline back in the day in the 80s, they kind of got to that first because it was such a big event. So it makes for a huge crossover in live action as well. Like I said, Avengers Endgame style for the Flash and the Arrowverse. So I'm really excited about this, but a lot of the characters from other shows, aka the multiverse Earths, like Birds of Prey, the TV show, Smallville, the 60s Batman series, they are coming into this Arrowverse, this universe, for the crossover. I'm breaking down everything in a separate video of who's going to be in this. There's even some rumors that the Titans are going to be in this. You know, Titans from DC Universe streaming show are going to be in this crossover. Don't know if that's true or not, but I'm breaking that down. Tom Ellis just announced that he wasn't going to be in this crossover. He plays Lucifer on the Lucifer series, but he just denied all the rumors of being in it. Who knows if he's actually lying, because they did say that they've seen him on set, but I don't know if that's really true. Maybe he was visiting somebody on set and not actually part of the event and just didn't want to say anything about it. But who knows? Who knows? We do know that there are some cool characters coming in, but again, making a separate video about that. But let's talk about Crisis in this episode specifically. So Barry tries to travel to the point of where he disappears, which is December 10th, 2019. So that's coming up really soon. So expect to see that eventually once we get there. But he tries to travel there because the monitor says that he will die that day. So once he tries to travel there after he talks to Iris, there is a wall of antimatter that's covering that part of the timeline, which means the anti-monitor, who is kind of like the exact opposite. It's like kind of like the reverse Flash and the Flash. The anti-monitor is the exact opposite to the monitor. So we'll be seeing him. They actually revealed a first look at the anti-monitor. He's a huge villain from the comics, and he is a character from the comics during the Crisis storyline. So he is, you know, very comic book accurate in terms of how they're treating this character. But just how the monitor is traveling through the multiverse. He showed up on Arrow, he showed up on Supergirl, and Supergirl takes place on Earth 38. So he showed up on that show for their finale. He showed up here on The Flash. He just keeps popping up everywhere. So the reason why that he is doing that is to get everybody ready for this event. But the anti-monitor is doing the same thing with his people. He is traveling the multiverse just like the monitor is. So that's why antimatter is popping up everywhere, and that's why Barry can't get through the timeline to actually see what's happening with this universe. He travels to Earth 3, sees Jay Garrick, sees Joan Williams, who is the doppelganger to his mother. He meets them. He sends his consciousness past that antimatter barrier. And once he does that, he sees multiple realities. I kind of didn't like how they did an Avengers Infinity War nod. Like, that was kind of like, okay, slow down. He sees billions of timelines just like Doctor Strange did. So I was like, I'm not really buying that one. But I'll just give him that because they're doing so much that is original for Crisis that isn't like Endgame or Infinity War. So I'll just give him a pass for that. But anyway, Barry sees multiple realities where everybody dies, right? Except for the one where he dies himself. That's actually a nod to the comic. So the scene where you see him kind of dissipate into energy and he just his whole body deteriorates, that's actually exactly pulled from the comic book story. So that's really cool that they're taking real stuff from the comic and just placing it into the show like no big deal. They've done that in the past, but I feel like with Crisis it's such a big deal because, again, it's one of the biggest DC stories of all time. They actually did a nod to Superman. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's really cool, again, that they're just taking all this really seriously because, you know, in the past, the Arrowverse hasn't taken things very seriously when it comes to DC Comics and being comic book accurate. So I do like that they're sticking to that now with this crossover. But like I said, there was a nod to Superman where Jay Garrick says that the world needs to be prepared for a world without the Flash. That's actually a nod to Superman, a world without Superman, which is an issue that came out shortly after Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Superman was no more, right? They had to deal with a world without him. And we actually have a lot of Supermen in this crossover. We have Tom Welling from Smallville, and then we also have Brandon Routh as the Kingdom Come Superman, and then we have Tyler Hoechlin's Superman from Earth 38. Again, I'll break all of that down in a separate video, but I'm wondering if they're going to follow that storyline too, or if it was just an Easter egg. We'll see what they do with the Superman storyline in the crossover. There's so many episodes in this crossover. It's so exciting. Anyway, back to the Flash. One Easter egg that was a big deal was the multiverse map that Jay Garrick showed while Barry was in Earth 38. So that map has a lot of Easter eggs, but let's break down the ones from my favorite Easter eggs to my least favorite. So my favorite Easter egg is the Thaddeus Brown mention. You can't really see it that well, so maybe I'll put in some zoom-ins, maybe I won't, I'm not really sure yet. But there is the name Thaddeus Brown. That is a reference to Mr. Miracle. So, Crisis on Infinite Earths aside, we're switching gears. This is really confusing for non-DC hardcore fans, but switching gears, so let's just ignore Crisis for now and focus on the name Thaddeus Brown. So Thaddeus Brown is the name that they use to address the character Mr. Miracle in the comics. Mr. Miracle is a part of the whole New Gods corner of the DC universe, which deals with Darkseid and Apocalypse, the character Big Barda, Orion. So there's a lot of characters that have to deal with that. Apocalypse and Darkseid is such a big deal. It's kind of like another Anti-Monitor situation. You have a huge big bad that the Justice League has gone up against. So it's kind of like to the side. I don't really know why they included it in the Crisis Easter egg, unless the next crossover will be something to deal with Apocalypse. Maybe they'll start introducing New Gods. Maybe they'll slide in some Darkseid Easter eggs. I can't imagine seeing them use Darkseid in this universe unless it's like the series finale of The Flash. So maybe like a couple years from now. But I don't know. It just seems kind of weird to me if they would try to do Darkseid. Maybe because the movies aren't doing him anymore since they switched gears in the DCEU. But it's weird that they've included a Mr. Miracle Easter egg because, again, it's referencing New Gods, which is completely separate from Crisis in a way because it's just such a big deal that you can't really do all of it at once or else it's kind of DC overload. So keep that in the back of your head for maybe in like the next couple of seasons when they try to do something different for their crossovers, right? But anyway, it's a huge Easter egg, and I'm a DC hardcore fan, so I kind of picked up on that right away, which is why it's on my most favorite spectrum. Then, the unknown Earth that was mentioned on this map. So a lot of people have theorized that it is the Smallville universe where Tom Welling is, and nobody knew that Earth existed, which is why nobody showed up in it during Smallville's run. So they're kind of trying to blend all of the shows together from past DC projects. So Smallville has all the DC characters, you know, the popular ones that you can think of have already appeared on that show. They even have their own Green Arrow, they even have their own Flash. But I think that was Bart Allen. I can't really remember because Smallville was such a long time ago. But anyway, we need to come up with reasons, right, as to why Barry and all the other crew haven't been on that Earth before. And the best reason is it's an unknown Earth, right? So that's how they're probably going to explain Smallville. Maybe they won't. Maybe that's explaining the Birds of Prey angle, right? Because the Birds of Prey TV show is also going to be blended in here. So maybe that's that universe where Huntress will be. Who knows? Again, I'm making a video all about this stuff. But yeah, it's exciting to see an unknown Earth and what that has to do with the stuff that's going on right now and what that has to do with the narrative of the crossover. So we'll see once that comes into fruition later on. But it's super exciting. I don't know what that Earth is, so leave your theories down below as to what you think it could be. Anyway, moving on to my next favorite. I loved when they mentioned the Earth 2 area of the multiverse, right? Earth 2 itself is the next area in which the anti-monitor or antimatter will hit. That might have to do with something coming up, setting up Crisis. So maybe one of the teams, probably Team Flash, because that makes the most sense, will go to Earth 2 and experience some kind of thing that's going to go on there. Maybe they'll meet the Anti-Monitor, or maybe someone will meet him, but we won't see him yet. Like, we won't get a face reveal until the crossover. But expect Earth 2 to be mentioned at some point soon, because that was Easter egged so heavily in the next point of Antimatter. So that will show up eventually, probably, if I'm guessing, because again, it's just such a big deal. In Earth 2, we've already been there so much before on The Flash, so hopefully that will show up at some point. Then my last favorite Easter egg is the 1986 nod, where one of the Earths was destroyed during 1986, which is the year that Crisis on Infinite Earth was actually released. So huge Easter egg there, because it's so what's the word? I don't know what the word is. I guess it's just fun because it's making a commentary on when the comic was actually released in real life. So just a fun nod there. So this map was really important. I really liked seeing it. I love Easter eggs like this because you have to kind of pause and search through and read everything. They mentioned Superman and Supergirl on Earth 38, and they also mentioned Harrison Wells, a different version of Wells. So we'll see if that's the Pariah Wells that's going to be showing up. Tom Cavanaugh is going to be a new version of Wells named Pariah in the crossover. I'll mention that in my characters video for Crisis, but super excited to have him back. I think there was a mention for him there as well. If not, I know that there was a Wells mentioned. I'm not seeing the image right now, but that's just off the top of my head. But anyway, that's some Crisis stuff that's going to be set up. It's super exciting. We have a lot of nods. Again, Mr. Miracle was teased. We had a lot of stuff with, World Without Superman that might occur because there's already so many Supermen in the crossover. And then we have some stuff with Barry and the Anti-Monitor, right? And setting up Antimatter. So it's super exciting. This is full throttle mode all the way to Crisis. And I think that Arrow had some Easter eggs pointing to Crisis as well. So I'll watch that episode. I still haven't watched it yet. And then maybe I'll make a video for that as well. But what do you guys think about this stuff? Are you excited for Crisis on Infinite Earths? Or are you just kind of really confused? If you are, we'll talk about it in the comments down below. And again, I am making another Crisis video, so I'll try to explain more in depth with certain characters there as well. But if you like this video, don't forget to comment down below, maybe give some theories about Crisis. I'd love to hear those. Like, favorite, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later for the next video. Bye-bye.